Alright, so what we have here is we have an outlet where the top one works, but the bottom one doesn't. Now, back in the day, this is the way it used to work, is a light switch over by the entry point, way over by the door, would actually flip on the lowers. Well, it turns out right now the light switches that are over there do not control either one, and it was just simply so you could flip on a lamp from the flip of a switch. And I say back in the day as far as the one of the outlets being switched, but really we still do that today, even new construction. Just for future reference, if you run into it, it's not necessarily a problem with the outlet, but we're going to dig in here and find out what is going on. Just simply might be a bad receptacle. Definitely, she's seen a little bit of Vietnam in her time, but we'll see what happens. Alright, something that I have here is this little insulator guy. A lot of times the outlets, what you'll notice is when you take the trim plate cover off, even when the trim plate cover's on, if you put your hand like right up against it, you'll notice how there's this little breeze that's coming from outside. It's about 33, 34 degrees outside right now, so it's a little bit noticeable, and yeah, they do have a little draft. Before the sheetrock is ever put on, when the insulation guys come in, they don't really get behind the box all that well, so technically this is not insulated that well behind this box right now. There'd be like a 2x4 going up like right here on this side. I would put money on it. So the point is make sure this little insulator guy gets put back on. Okay, so here we have a brand new receptacle. So what you'll notice and what I want to talk about is there's this little tab that goes between each of the terminals right there. Notice on both sides. And the cool thing about this is you could actually set this receptacle up to where it would be on a switch leg by itself. So I started looking in here, and immediately, wouldn't you know it, this side has that little ear, that little tab if you will, that is on the neutral side. I know that because of the way that this is. On the bigger guy is always the neutral. If you look in there, you'll notice that the tab has been broke off. Alright, let's get it replaced. Customer requests that this outlet functions on both receptacles. Alright, so what do you do if you're working by yourself and you don't feel like running up and down the stairs to see if you cut power to the circuit breaker or not? Hey, this is my idea. Check this out. Little ghetto blaster right there. I think I'm going to listen for the sound. When she stops, I will know that I've cut power. Alright, what we have here is we have two hots coming in. So what the red one is, usually the red is the switch leg. So remember earlier in the video I mentioned that back in the day to today they used to have a switch leg for a lamp that you plug in the bottom side. That way you can simply flip off a lamp. So you can flip half the receptacle off and the ear is broken off. Well, somebody has came through here and remodeled, and I bet you they've taken this red wire that's over here and he's just simply capped off and by himself. So since that's the way we're doing it now, we will now put in a new receptacle with a little tab still in place, and we will just simply tie this back. Another thing is we notice we have aluminum wires. So one thing with aluminum conductors is you're actually never supposed to land them by themselves. There's this compound called NOx. Here we are, this guy right here. You're actually supposed to take this stuff and land it on all your connections. The reason why is because when you have two dissimilar metals, and especially if it's not rated for it, you're actually supposed to use NOx on your connections, and it doesn't take much to complete it. What happened in like the, I think, 1970s is a lot of people installed these and they didn't use NOx on their connections, and I was told that that's why a lot of the houses that were built in the 70s actually burned down, is because of this. Another thing with the aluminum conductors is that their expansion and contraction with the heat, plus or minus, like I said, there's a lot of air coming through there, actually affects the connections on this differently as opposed to copper. This can create loose connections and in turn create a fire hazard. So if you look back, you'll notice how this box actually doesn't look metal. You'll notice how the ground wire on the side of the terminal isn't actually connected to the box. Well, the reason why that is because this box is not metal. It is actually, what's the name of it? So our red wires are switch leg. We're just going to push him far back into the box as possible. There's nothing like working on electrical outlets during a football game, so I better get moving on this guy. One thing you'll notice is definitely the color. This was the trim plate that was already on there, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and reuse this guy. Nothing wrong with him. He's not cracked or anything. Now when it comes to the colors of these, this is referred to like almond. White's not just white. There's different tints of white, so you got to watch out for that. This is obviously just white, whatever you want to call it. Now, there's nothing wrong with aluminum conductors, but they must be installed appropriately, according to National Electric Code. So here we are in the main electrical panel right here. Never mind the actual look of it or the color of rust. But what I want to show you is how nothing is actually labeled. This makes troubleshooting a really big pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this down and what circuit it is. That way the future person and whoever owns the house, for example, will know what circuit breaker actually controls what. Something you'll notice about this receptacle is how it actually looks a little bit different right here where the actual points are. And what this is an anti-tamper. For example, your kid comes over and tries to shove a fork in it and watches it glow, and result you have a bad day. So this is, I think this is pretty standard now to see this anti-tamper in it. You notice how the ground doesn't have it, obviously because it's a ground, doesn't need it. You can get shocked off the neutral. If the circuit is loaded, you can get hit with it. Now it won't be 120, it'll be knocked down. But depending on how hard, what the voltage is and how dry your hands are, etc., you can get bit from that. I like anti-tamper. Kind of sucks, but it's safe. Fiberglass box. So what I've done is I actually wrote down living room front. Now this particular house does have 2 living rooms. One in the back, one in the front. If you look, now this part is actually labeled, but this right here has a 9 on it. So there is no need to ground this because fiberglass does not conduct electricity, and that is appropriate for National Electric Code. Alright, total success. Radio's on, lights on. Now something I did want to note is that little cushion, that little insulation pad actually makes the trim plate stick out slightly more, but it's a reasonable sacrifice to help simply keep your house insulated. So one thing I could do is if I really cared about the way it looks, I could actually take that back out and put the trim plate on, and the receptacle, the trim plate would actually sit more flush up against that. But I think the customer would appreciate it just fine like this. Something that you'll notice is that this receptacle has this weird little slash in the side of it, and where this one here does not. And what that is actually, it's a rating to show you what the receptacle itself is worth, or excuse me, is what it can take. You see how this one says 20 amps? This one will say 15. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean the circuit is on a 20 amp breaker, because the guy coming in behind me can actually put in oversized or undersized receptacle in place. It's important that you put in the correct size receptacle for what the circuit's rated. Say it.
If you like, subscribe more videos.